Hey there, welcome to Utility Sports. Today we are going over the NBA draft, and more importantly, we're going to be going over sleepers in the NBA draft. I'm joined by Sheldon, and we're going to take a look at some of the guys that we think are kind of going under the radar and will possibly be drafted lower than they may be anticipated to go. So, Sheldon, I'm going to start with you. Who's the first sleeper that you have in the class?
The first sleeper is Jay Scrubb out of Logan. It's a junior college. For those of you who don't know, it's a Division II school, and obviously that's kind of a question mark for most NBA prospects. Usually get a lot at the big high D1 level ACC competition, SEC competition, for the most part. But Jay Scrubb, it just kind of jumps off the page to me watching him. His film. He's an extremely explosive player. Left-handed, good ability to create shots. Struggled a little bit from time to time with his jumper in his 2 years at Logan, but I think he's got the physical makeup and profile that you really need to be a starting NBA guard in this league, and I think that's kind of what he'll end up transitioning into, despite being a late second-round pick probably on draft night. He's got a lot of shades of Monta Ellis in terms of ability. Fluid with the ball in his hands, can get to the rim, especially prefers going left. Needs to open up his game going to the right a little bit yet at this point. But overall, I love Scrubb's athleticism. He got good 6'6" frame with about 6'8" wingspan, so he fits right into that NBA mold as a wing. And he's got some ball handling talent that's undeniable. So I think that he'll be really a guy to watch that'll go later in the draft.
Absolutely. And do you want to kind of dig into a little bit why Jay Scrubb ended up at the JUCO level?
Yeah, he actually had a lot of issues with his academics while in high school. He ended up actually failing his freshman year of high school, which really hurt his transcripts. He was a four-star coming out of high school, so this guy has been highly touted before in his career. He would have been a top 50 prospect in his class without the academic suspension from most Division I schools and inability to take a scholarship. So then the Division II route was the way he went, and he kind of really exceeded there. There was thoughts he might transfer to Louisville. He had verbally committed there this past year after getting his grades kind of back in check. But overall, he's really a solid player, and the academic background shouldn't affect his draft stock, in my opinion.
So now with that, who would be the next sleeper that you have?
It's a guy we're watching right here, and we've seen a lot of this year, Payton Pritchard. Really talented guard for Oregon, can shoot the ball, really good passer. His ability to handle the ball is really top notch, plays through contact well, kind of a lower to the ground guard, and doesn't really have that high end potential. That is why he'll be a second round pick in my opinion, or potentially very late first to a contending team. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Jalen Brunson from Villanova when he came out. Just a guy he's an NBA ready guard. I think Pritchard's a little bit more talented than Brunson was. And I think they got a lot of the same qualities of, being able to come in and compete right away and help the team out coming off the bench.
Where do you see his best role being? Like, what do you see his NBA career kind of looking like?
Yeah, I think for him personally, I think the best thing he could end up being is a really low end starting point guard. Where like if you litter talent around him, a lot of talented wings and bigs, that I think he could be an okay starting guard. But I think he'd probably be best suited coming off the bench with a scoring option next to him, or just coming in for a low level starting point guard and kind of being that rotation filler. Which when you're talking second round, that's an extremely valuable pick. And that's something that some of these teams could really use some more long-term options and stability. And I think a guy like him in the backcourt's a good option for some of those teams.
Absolutely. I think Peyton Pritchard's definitely flying under the radar. We did see a lot of them. Oregon played on a lot of national TV games, so we do have a lot of exposure. So it's most people know who he is going into the NBA draft, but we do feel like he will be underdrafted for a lot of the same reasons that you brought up, because of he doesn't have that high ceiling. However, there is value in having guys that are ready to play right away in the league, not having to groom them. Some of the contending teams may look at him. For me, I went to Missouri State for my prospect, Keiondre Cook. He's a 6'5" wing. He was a senior this past year, so unfortunately he's going to be around that 22, 23 years old. So, not a ton of room for growth in terms of, drafting a young prospect. Some of the nice things about him is at Missouri State, he was a 3-level scorer. He could easily handle the ball. for being 6'5", which was pretty impressive. He was able to create shots, create space. The one thing about him is he actually shot very well from three, shot 42%, which was pretty impressive. However, he was not a high volume player at Missouri State. I believe he only scored 14 points per game. So it wasn't like they were just completely riding him in an offense. So he was able to play within a system. He didn't need to constantly have the ball in his hands in order to succeed. He was efficient with the ball, took good shots. So I think he's a guy that a lot of teams could use. I don't exactly know where his potential lies. He's not a super freak athlete or anything like that. So his athleticism is a little limited. However, I think this guy definitely has some of the tools to be a very nice bench player in the NBA, and you can find him in the second round, mid-second round, possibly end of second round.
Yeah, that's kind of what I see with him too. I think your analysis really hit it there, Austin, with his ability to come off the bench and really, find a bucket. He's able to create space, like you were mentioning, his ability to handle the rock. And I think he's just a nice guy to, potentially grows into a starter at some point, but worst case, you're giving yourself a scoring option off the bench, whether it takes 1 or 2 years to really get him acclimated to the NBA or not. But I mean, a lot of teams that are, good, talented teams with, good front offices will probably be targeting a guy like him late or as an undrafted free agent for him, which is a possibility. And I think that a lot of teams like the Toronto Raptors might be a team to target him with their history of acquiring talent after the draft.
Absolutely. And who's your next prospect that you have teed up here?
The next one, I really love this prospect, Leandro Bolmaro, a little bit of Argentinian flavor here. Played in Spain this past year in the EuroLeague, and he didn't have a lot of volume, but when he did, he showed flashes of, really creative ball handling, really good court vision. I mean, this guy, he's got shades of Manu Ginobili to him, which sounds a little casual, I understand. And he's not going to be Manu Ginobili, but his flair and ability to read the floor while playing pretty uniquely is very interesting. I think he's got high potential as a secondary creator for a team, and I think that he's going to be a capable player to take defenders off the dribble on a night-to-night basis, especially coming off the bench early in his career and potentially growing into that starting role later on.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm going to prompt you with something real quick here to kind of conclude. If you're looking at some of the second round guys, you have a second round pick and you're a team that kind of needs a kickstart to your franchise. Let's say hypothetically you're kind of sitting in the middle of the second round, okay? And you are prompted with a senior who is pretty consistent throughout his career. He can play a role for you. Or would you take a guy that was a potential or was a 5-star coming out of high school, went to probably not the right college, it didn't click for him? What kind of prospect would you rather have in that situation?
So yeah, there's a lot of love for players like Cassius Stanley out there in the second round, and I can definitely see the value there. You're getting a guy who is highly touted out of high school, but to me, it depends on kind of like looking for a jump start. Jump starts obviously come through hot players and all that, but I also think some of these teams that have struggled over the years, like the New York Knicks and the Chicago Bulls, to name a couple, and the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think that one thing they really lack is stability. And I think, obviously you want to take a home run pick when you have a chance at it. But the likelihood of one of those guys working out to be a franchise guy is so low that I think getting a guy is going to be able to come in, be a hard worker, set kind of an example, and has experience playing in big games like guys like Peyton Pritchard and Jalen Brunson had coming out. I think that level of stability, even though that their ceiling isn't that high, is extremely valuable to build around. And I think you kind of build a winning culture doing that. And I think that is probably the route I would go unless I really, really love the guy. For example, I'm not in love with Cassius Stanley, so I think like I would opt for Peyton Pritchard probably in the second round over Stanley if I was one of those teams that needs to kind of remodel their franchise.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so kind of the issue where some of these teams that are either average or, below average, they'll opt to take a guy that, they have a lot of the physical tools and everything. However, they're that kind of franchise for a reason because they can't develop, they can't produce good players. So if you take a guy who's already super raw and you try to develop him yourselves, a lot of times that's not going to work out great.
Yeah, right. And a lot of these players, I mean, at some point you have to value winning a little bit. And these guys who win all throughout high school, all throughout college, they're probably doing something right on a game-to-game basis in order to put their teams into positions to win. And obviously at the NBA level, you can't count on a guy like Payton Pritchard to necessarily lead your team there, but he can definitely give you valuable minutes that helps your team end up coming close down the stretch of games, and can really tide in backup minutes for you. And I think that's something valuable. And I think not only contenders should be looking for that, but also rebuilding teams like we were just saying. And I also think that, if you are a contending team or a really talented team, maybe you take a chance on one of those high school prospects like you were bringing up that have been highly touted 5-star, 4-star kind of guys, and then say, okay, we have the infrastructure around to maybe put this player into some successful positions early in their career, and then kind of, put them into positions to actually grow while not having to rely on them early.
Yep, exactly. And I think there's value in even hedging if you have, 2 second-round picks, taking a boom or bust guy that could be, very, very talented. He's just got a few glaring holes in his game, and then a guy that's very consistent. And after watching Peyton Pritchard, does he remind you a little bit of like Fred VanVleet, just how he shoots the basketball and handles the basketball?
Yeah, definitely. He's got that compact guard to him, like I was mentioning, and he's a big shot hitter and a big shot maker, and he's comfortable taking that big shot. He's such a huge part of Oregon's success, especially this past season. I think that he's going to be one of those guys that is going to come into the league. He's going to have a 12-year career. He's going to be a little bit like DJ Augustine, in my opinion, which obviously is not the greatest comp for, a prospect coming out. But not every player is going to be John Morant or Zion Williamson, and people need to keep that in mind, that getting a guy who has a 12-year NBA career is a really, really good pick in the second round. And the only guy really in the second round that I'd see myself probably taking above him, like, pretty consistently, that our second round mocks would be Jay Scrubb, because I think he'll be a top 14 player in this class when it's all said and done. I think he's got all the tools, and I think he showed a lot of that off. He's got a 40-inch vertical, but other than that, Pritchard would be one of my top second round selections.
Absolutely. So to conclude that video, we just recap some of the sleepers in the draft and guys that might be undervalued. Actually, for our next video, we will be going over some of the prospects that might be slightly overrated or might be picked a little bit too high during the draft and could also be overvalued by the media. So we'll kind of go through some of that, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section.